Hi, I'm Jen Lucas, and in this video, I want to show you how to attach a new ball of yarn to your project. So for most projects, you're going to need more than one ball or skein of yarn to complete it. And so at some point, you're going to run out of yarn and you're going to need to attach a new ball. So I just want to show you just how easy it is. It's not complicated at all, and there's actually a couple different ways that you can do it. So ideally, you're going to want to join your new ball of yarn at the beginning of a row. It just makes it a lot easier. And when you go to weave in the ends, because you're going to have two ends there from your old yarn and your new yarn, it's much easier just to weave in the ends along the edge. It just makes them a little more invisible versus if you join your new ball of yarn in the middle of the row, and you definitely can do that. And there are situations where you do it because you've run out of yarn and you have so many stitches on the needle and you don't want to rip back. You can join a new ball of yarn in the middle of the row, but you will want to proceed with caution. So if you're making something that is at a loose gauge, like think of like a very airy shawl or even like a lacy sweater, if you're knitting at a loose gauge and you join your new ball of yarn in the middle of the row and then you go to weave in those ends, if your fabric is really loose, sometimes it can actually be visible where you've joined that new ball, because where you've gone and woven in those ends, you can kind of see them because the fabric is so loose. So I always recommend if you can join your new ball of yarn at the beginning of the row, that is really the best thing to do, and that's what I'm going to do here. So here I just have a swatch where I've just knit some garter stitch. So I knit on both the right side and the wrong side, and here I have my tail because I've run out of yarn. And so I'm going to join with a new color. I'm going to use the purple, but you might be using the same color if your project's all in one color. But this method works too if you are knitting a project that's in more than one color. So we're going to go ahead and just take the end of this yarn, and I'm going to show you two ways to do this. So the first way, which is really the easiest way, is that I'm going to insert my needle to do whatever my stitch is in your pattern. For me, I'm just going to knit. I'm just going to take a length of yarn, and you just want to leave enough so that you have a tail to weave in later, maybe 6 inches. And you're just going to kind of make a little loop like this and just place it on the needle. So that represents sort of the wrapping around of your stitch, and pull it through. And that's all there is to it. Now we have the new color attached, and then you would just keep knitting along or following whatever your pattern is. So I'm just going to do a few knit stitches here. Now, you do see here where this is a little loose. You can kind of see we have this sort of loose stitch right here. So you can just sort of give your tails a slight tug. You don't want to really crank down on them, but you could give them a slight tug to tighten them up. Now, some knitters do like to tie a knot. I personally don't typically tie knots in my knitting, but if you're worried about this not being secure, you can come in and just tie very loosely. I would just sort of tie these together loosely like this, just like a simple little overhand thing. But when I'm done with my project, I would come back, undo this knot, and then weave in my ends. But if it makes you feel more secure to sort of tie those ends together, you can go ahead and do it. It's your project. You need to do what makes you happy. So that's really all there is to joining a new ball of yarn. But I'm going to show you another way that I actually use quite a bit. So I'm just going to undo what I had here so we can just get back to the beginning of the row. So here I'm at the end. Now I have my new color. I actually will hold my tail with the working yarn of my new ball of yarn. So this is the one that's going to my actual ball of yarn. And I actually will knit 1 or 2 stitches with both of the yarns held together like this. And so you can see now I have these stitches where I have both the green and the purple. And again, if you were working your project all in one color, you would just have 2 strands of the same color, but one would be from your old ball and one from your new ball. And then after I've worked a couple stitches, I would drop that old color and just keep working. And so this makes it feel a little more secure as far as joining the ball of yarn goes, and that's great. You still have your ends to weave in at the end. The important thing to remember is if you do go this route, when you're coming back on the next row, you need to remember to treat these as one stitch because you have 2 strands of yarn here, but you held those yarns together. So this is still only 1 stitch. So you just want to make sure that you don't make the mistake of accidentally knitting one of these strands and then knitting the other strand, and now you've added an extra stitch to your knitting. But this is a way that if that first way doesn't work for you, it doesn't feel so secure, you can do this way too, where you're holding those 2 strands together for a few stitches. And then again, just make sure on that next row that you're working those as a single stitch. And that's all there is to it. So whether you're joining the same color or you're switching to a new color, as you can see, joining a new ball of yarn is actually very simple.